What's all this, Mia?
Don't touch, Sam. That's part of my experiment.
Experiment? What are you, a scientist now?
I am using the scientific method to see whether or not hummingbirds are attracted to the color red.
Can't you just keep track of which bird feeder they eat from the most?
That is kind of what I'm doing. By going through each step of the scientific method, I can test my theory to see if it's true or false. The scientific method is the process that scientists use to investigate the world. I had put a red feeder and a blue feeder up in the tree, and after watching for a few days, I observed that most of the food was gone in the red one. That's the first step of the scientific method, observation.
Well, doesn't that observation mean that hummingbirds like the red feeder better?
It could mean that. Once scientists make their observations, they start to ask questions about what they've seen. Like, why was the food in the red feeder gone first? Then they come up with a hypothesis that might answer their question.
Who?
Hypothesis. That's science lingo for prediction or a temporary answer that you can test. My hypothesis is hummingbirds are attracted to the color red.
So how do you test if your hypothesis is correct?
That's the next step, designing experiments. An experiment is a scientific test to try out a theory or to see some effect. To test if hummingbirds really are attracted to the color red, I hung up 4 different colored bird feeders with exactly the same amount and type of food. When scientists design an experiment, they try to control every little variable, things that might affect the outcome.
That's why you told me not to touch. You were worried I'd disturb the variables.
If you don't control the variables, it's not a fair test. If you touch one of the feeders, the birds might not eat from it because you touched or spilled it, not because it isn't red.
Sounds a little nitpicky, Mia.
Scientists can never be too careful. It's also important to write down every step in the experiment. That way, you can do it over to compare your results.
Is that what's in that notebook?
Yep, but it's also where the next step of the scientific method comes into play. Gathering data.
Data is information, right?
Right. I took a picture of each bird feeder every morning and night for a week. I pasted the pictures in this notebook and labeled the time and date and wrote down which feeder had the most food missing each day.
Why'd you do it for a whole week?
To make sure the results were the same every time.
Were they?
Let's draw our conclusion and find out. Drawing a conclusion is like the aha moment. It's when you look at your data to see what it tells you.
Let's see those pictures you've got. That's your data, right?
Yeah, I've carefully organized the pictures into a chart to show my results. We need to ask, does our conclusion fit our hypothesis? Our data shows us that they ate the food in the red feeder the most. Our conclusion supports our hypothesis. Hummingbirds are attracted to the color red.
But why are they attracted to the color red?
Why is the final step in the scientific method. Keep asking questions.
I guess that's why scientists keep on finding out more about the world. They watch the world around them, develop hypotheses about how things work, and test their hypotheses with cool experiments. Once the experiment is done and the data is collected, scientists can draw conclusions about their hypothesis and find out if they were right or wrong.
Right. Observations, hypothesis, experiment, data, conclusion. That's the scientific method behind the madness.